Stress and burnout are big topics today.
Mm-hmm.
How can one continue to prioritize their health and well-being while pursuing their goals?
Okay, so there's a flaw in that whole logic train, right? Which is you made it about an individual. It's about me, my stress, my goals, me. And human beings are social animals, and we are not very good at doing anything by ourselves, which is why we consider solitary confinement a form of torture. The worst thing you can do to a human being is take away the people. And so the reason we see stress and burnout on the increase, and anxiety and depression, and in the worst case scenarios, antisocial behaviors or harmful behaviors like suicide, right? The reason those things are on the rise is largely because we're probably feeling lonelier. In other words, it's the loneliness that produces the feelings, not the feelings that produce the loneliness. There's a study done way like in the 50s or 60s. That study is the underpinning for a lot of our understanding of addiction today, where they put a rat in a cage and they gave it two choices of water, plain water or drug-laced water. It tried both, liked the drug-laced water, kept taking the drug-laced water, got addicted, and eventually died, right? But a guy by the name of, I think it's Bruce Alexander, a bunch of years later, recognized that the experiment was flawed, that rats, like human beings, are social animals. And we put a rat by itself in a cage, so it was lonely. And so it became addicted to the drugs because of it was lonely, not the other way around. And so he redid the experiment where he put lots of rats in a cage and put mazes and fun things to do, and they were having babies and relationships. And he put two waters, one drug-laced, one plain, and they tried both, and they tried enough to get addicted, but they can see from the data about the amount of water they consumed that the drug-laced water went in decline. They drank the regular water more often. In other words, when we have healthy relationships, we're less likely to get addicted. So all of this thing about cell phones and social media, it's all true, and those are very dangerous dopamine-producing things. But it raises the question that if we have really strong, healthy friendships, we become less susceptible to the addictive qualities of those things. So the thing that we're missing is friends. And if you ask most people, are you a good friend? Most people say yes. But the reality is we're not, right? And if you think about the value of friendship, right? So you said we see the rise of all these things, depression, anxiety, lack of stress coping mechanisms, even the obsession with longevity. Well, friendship fixes all of those things, literally. People with close friends live longer, they're healthier, they have lower levels of stress, depression, and they live longer. I said that one. Friendship is the ultimate biohack, but people don't. They work on their nutrition, they work on their exercise. How many people are working on their friendships? We know that marriages, you talk to great marriages and say, what's your secret? They all say exactly the same thing. It's a lot of work, and we do the work. When was the last time you did work on your friendships? Like when there's a violation of trust in a relationship, you don't immediately walk away from the relationship. You kind of try and work through it and see if you can get through it. The number of times that there's a violation of trust in a friendship, we go, we just can't be friends anymore, and we walk away. Do we take time to read books or watch talks or read articles about how to communicate better with our friends, how to have conflict with our friends? Like there's an entire industry to help us be better leaders. There's an entire industry to help us be better parents. There's an entire industry to teach us how to eat better, exercise better, even have better marriages. And yet there's precious little to nothing to help us be better friends. And I, for one, believe that friendship is the most underrated, undervalued, most important element of being a social animal in a very, very difficult world. And so the answer to your question is work on your friendships, and all those other things get fixed.
Wow. What are the best ways to nurture those relationships?
So one is prioritization. Like, I know you would cancel on a friend because you had a meeting. Would you cancel on a meeting because you have something with a friend? Well, my friend would understand, right? We prioritize our careers almost always before our friendships. Let's start there. Now, it doesn't have to be a rule. You don't always have to prioritize your friends, but we can probably get the balance better. Do you know how to react when your friends are going through a hard time? Do you try and fix them? Do you get on the phone and be like, all right, here's what you need to do. Buck out of it. Why are you so depressed? Everybody loves you. You're great. Is that what you try and do? You try and fix them and change their mind? Or do you go to their house, get into bed with them, watch movies all day, and just be depressed with them so they don't feel alone?
Yeah, the latter.
What happens when you have tension with a friend? Do you know how to address that tension? Have you taken a listening class on active listening so that your friends feel seen and heard and understood? Like, are you doing the work? Are you doing the work to be a friend? Most of us are crap at listening. We try and fix our friends' problems. We take them for granted. We expect them to be there. I think younger generations, on balance, it's not exclusive, but on balance, struggle even more. They would even admit, they've told me that they love their friends, they have fun with their friends, but they wouldn't go to their friends in like a dark time, and they wouldn't be surprised if their friends counted on them because they got better plans. That's called loneliness, right? And the easiest way to make better friends is to be a better friend. One of the things that, as I've been talking about this, has surprised me, that people at all ages, at all success levels, talk about how they're struggling to make friends.
Wow.
And that's hard too. Like, how do I make a friend? People are shy. They're afraid of being judged. They don't know how to start a conversation. And there's all these new groups popping up to help people make friends, which I think are great. But I think that's one of the things we need to do as well, which is, do we even know how to make a friend, right? We blame ourselves, well, I'm an introvert, I'm a this, I'm a that. I just don't, but that's one of the hurdles we have to overcome.
You always hear this anecdote that it becomes more difficult from people that are older to make friends as you get older. Is there any truth to that?
Definitely, from what I've heard from the people who are talking to me about it, yes. Sometimes because you've got, a spouse, you've got kids, you've got different levels of responsibility, and you live at home with the family. And so how do you go and make a friend, right? Usually parents make friends with other parents, through their kids.
Yeah.
I mean, that makes sense. But if you were a salesperson and you needed to, every salesperson knows this, which is it's a hustle, and not everything works out, but you kind of got to make the phone calls. If you don't make the phone calls, you're not going to make the sales. And to some degree, there's some truth to that as well, which is, if you've met a few people that you kind of like and you connected with a little bit, like, write all their names on a Post-it and put them on the fridge or something. And every now and then, maybe call one of them and have a conversation. Maybe every now and then call one of them and say, you want to meet for a coffee? You want to meet for lunch or dinner? Like, make a point to make the calls, to make the friends, because they're not going to make themselves. And invest in the friendships that you have. We also have this twisted sense that where we treat friends a little bit like family. Now, family and friends are very, very different, because you get to choose your friends. You don't get to choose your family, right? And sometimes we do treat friends like family, where we've known them for so long, we treat them as if they can't be changed. And very often we've outgrown people. We're on different growth paths. And I know I've been friends with you for 15, 20 years, but I mean, we don't have anything in common anymore. Like, your life went in one direction, mine went in another direction. I still adore you, but I have less in common with you now than I did when our lives were very similar. And so it's okay to drift apart. Like, that's okay, because I know people who spend time with their old friends because they feel like they have to, because the only bond is time. They don't actually have anything in common anymore. And somebody just revealed this to me recently, actually, just this last weekend, where he realized he was spending time with old friends, and he would show up and act. He would pretend to be the guy he used to be.
Wow.
Because that's the guy that they wanted to be friends with, but that's not who he is anymore. And he had to come to this realization, like, I think we're different and we've outgrown each other, and that's okay. We, even if those old friendships, if the bond is only time, if there's a there, then you have to foster it, you have to nurse it. And by the way, I completely disagree with the whole idea is, you hear people talking, like, we overuse the term family, like, you hear people talking about it in business, like, well, our team is like a family. And somebody goes, how can it be like a family? You never fire family members, and you fire. Well, that's actually not true either. We all have an uncle who's freaking nuts, and we don't invite them to Thanksgiving. We don't want them there because they're nuts, right? So we do exclude family members. So the point is like, you do get to choose who you spend time with, friends and family, and choose wisely, because the people you spend time with will have an impact on you. And there's a lot of data on this, like a group of smokers and one of the friends decides to stop smoking, and like 80% of them stop smoking, or 90% of them stop smoking, or one of the friend group decides to get into shape, and they all get into shape, and it has ripples. It goes from like 90% to 30% to 10% to 7%. Like it has like multiple ripples to multiple friend groups that you don't even know. And so you are your friends, and your friends are you. And so you're spending time with people who. And by the way, when I talk about friends, not all friends need to be deep, meaningful relationships. Some of them can be silly and superficial, and I just have fun with them, but I'm like, I'm not calling them in a freaking crisis, but I like hanging out with them. That's totally fine. Like, there are levels and layers of friendship. But the point I'm trying to make is we have too many superficial friends. We have too many friends that we just have fun with. We need more friends that are deep, meaningful relationships, that when the shit hits the fan, I call them up and I go, I'm struggling. And I have a rule with my friends, which is no crying alone.
No crying alone.
No crying alone, which is if you are overwhelmed by something social, you had a bad thing happen in your private life, work has got you, you feel alone, you're not allowed to be in that state alone. You pick up the phone, you call me or one of your other friends, it doesn't matter. And you say, you have a minute? Yeah. Can I just vent? Yeah. Can I just cry? Yeah. Can I just borrow you for a minute? Yeah. That's the rule. No crying alone. And it doesn't happen often, but when it happens, I had a friend call me. She was going through a rough time, and A-type, super successful, personality. And she called me up and said, do you have a minute? I went, yeah. She goes, not a good place. I go, tell me more. She goes, I would go to my husband, but he's not in a good place either. And I know he doesn't have the bandwidth for me, and I don't want to put this on him. So I'm calling you. And I go, yeah, what do you need? And she and I he was my friend first. I met her through him. And she and I became super close because of this experience. And he is eternally grateful to me that I could be there for his wife in a time when he couldn't, just to be on the phone with her for an hour, And this is the value of friendship. But somebody has to make the rule. Somebody has to say, hey, new rule amongst friends, no crying alone, I had another experience with another friend. My friend Maria is at her house, and we're just catching up. And she told me how the week before she went through real bad time. And I was like, why didn't you call me? Like, I'm here for you. Like, why didn't you call me? She says, I did. I'm like, no, you didn't. She's like, yeah, I texted you multiple times. I'm like, you did not. Otherwise I would have responded. She goes, I did. And I pull out my phone and I look at the text, and it says, hey, what you doing? Hey, want to come over? I'm like, you mean these texts? The ones that sound like all the other texts you send me? How do I know that's a cry for help? And she had read an article that said that when somebody's struggling, all they need is 8 minutes of attention to make them feel not alone, so they can sort of get through the rest of the day. So you don't have to give them 2, 3, 4 hours in that moment. They just need 8 minutes to sort of make them feel not alone, and you can reconnect with them later. So my friend and Maria and I came up with a symbol, a sign, which is, if you really need someone, you simply send them a text that says, do you have 8 minutes? And that means, I need you. And anyone can step out of a meeting for 8 minutes and say, I'm here. I got you. I'll call you in an hour, but you're not alone. And so all these little things, all these little tricks of the trade help make friendships stronger and make people feel not alone. But as I'm talking about them, the question is, how many of us are practicing them? And that's why I'm talking about them, because I want us to practice them.
Yeah, wow. 8 minutes to completely change somebody's day, a friend's day.
Well, if somebody's going through a hard time, and we know, like, we don't want to call our friends in hard times because we don't want to bother them. We get insecure. I know you're busy, but, nobody's afraid to ask for 8 minutes, and everybody's available to give 8 minutes. So it's a low bar. And like, again, that doesn't solve the problem, but it allows you to be there for your friend, and it allows them to feel not alone. And when more time is available, then you should give that as well.
Hey, if you liked that video, you need to check out this one here, and I'll see you there.